For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Morning. So shares in Asia Pacific slightly higher in their trading day, which has just finished. And no question, the only show in town basically is the Fed and what they're going to do about interest rates. Everybody's expecting a 75 basis point, 0.75% rise there. The real question is what they do afterwards, which I'll come on to in a second. So therefore, the Hang Seng in Hong Kong up a little, about 1.75%. The Shanghai Composite in China reversed losses to gain around about 1%. The thing about Hong Kong is that it's very much in the market for overseas investors now. It says that it's finished doing all its coronavirus lockdown and so on, and it wants more input from the rest of the world. So the MSCI's broadest index of Asia Pacific shares outside Japan up about 0.5% this morning. Staying with China, if I may, XPeng electric car deliveries drop in October to half of NIO's. I only mention this because it's one of those companies, it is a startup itself, and actually the Chinese electric car startup XPeng has rivals in China as well, and it really does depend upon the pull from the consumer market there as to what they're actually doing. Mass deliveries begin on October the 27th. Or began rather on October the 27th. US recap, stocks futures slightly higher ahead of that key policy decision from the Fed. I don't think there's much doubt that they will raise interest rates by about 0.75%, 75 basis points. But will it signal that it actually wants to slow the pace of those interest rate rises? Many people think it will. So what they've got to do is they've got to be hawkish and say we're going to bear down on inflation, but they don't want to strangle the economy as well. And shares of US social media companies Snap and Meta spiked on news that the Federal Communications Commissioner said the government should ban TikTok. It won't necessarily do that, but that's something which it's actually said the Treasury and Justice Departments are leading a review, and they're also in negotiations with the company. Some more stock news for you. AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, missed what was asked of it, but it ekes out 29% revenue growth. Not bad at all. Amazon, by contrast, closed down on Tuesday for a fifth straight day. It dropped 5.9% to $96.79 cents a share. Elon Musk has been laying out his ideas for Twitter's new verification program. I have to say, I find it difficult to understand. Apparently, it's a bit like a sort of premium subscription service. You pay them and they say you're okay. Now, what is that about, basically? And how is that actually answering the questions that are being asked, will be asked of Twitter? And I'm guessing, you get this blue check thing if you send them $8. Well, who's to say that bad accounts wouldn't do that? In any case, I think it's going to be really interesting to how it deals with the midterms, which are coming up on November the 8th in the United States. And if it actually manages to navigate those without too much undue criticism, I'll begin to believe in it again. In the UK, Sunak has postponed his showdown with the city. Now, what this is a part of the finance bill that would allow the government to intervene if it felt there was a public interest issue with the regulators. The regulators are saying that if you do that, that's fine, but it does actually undermine the city's reputation as a financial centre, the City of London's reputation as a financial centre, and they're advising him not to. Anyway, all those decisions have been postponed at the moment. Bank of England, it will announce its interest rate decision on Thursday. It's likely that there will be an increase. How much, of course, not quite sure, but maybe 0.75%, maybe just 0.5%, depending on what they feel about the economy. But they have actually started quantitative tightening They have begun to sell bonds that they bought, which is all illustrative of the fact that the bond market has finally quietened down after all that tumult. The cost of a cup of tea. Now then, who likes a nice cuppa? That's what we as a nation like. Obviously, the India, Sri Lanka, Ceylon and Sri Lanka actually at the heart of this many years ago. But we like a cup of tea, and the cost of making it up. It's one illustration of the rise in food inflation, which is now running at 11.6%, which is very high indeed. Commodities, oil steadies amid bullish OPEC forecasts. Yeah, so what OPEC's thinking is that they're not buying into this business of global demand actually falling away. I don't know where they get the figures from, but they aren't at the moment, and that's pushing something underneath the oil market. And again, the real shortages are not going to happen this winter, certainly as far as gas is concerned anyway. They will happen next winter. Profits at BP and Saudi Aramco at $42 billion. BP doubled to $8 billion. No doubt this will be more calls. There'll be more calls for a windfall tax. Messrs. Sunak and the Chancellor, the Finance Minister, Jeremy Hunt, are looking at the increase of windfall taxes. It's difficult actually to do this. I mean, there's another aspect of all this windfall stuff, which is that BP, which no doubt people will be looking at, and I was watching the news last night, and there was all how much it is a minute and all the rest of it, all those kind of statistics, but actually it makes most of its money outside the UK. So therefore, how will it be taxed on money that it makes outside the UK? That'll be quite a complicated thing for the regulators to consider. Should windfall taxes come in? That's the global view this morning.
All right, Michael. Number one will be the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, was going against the, financial watchdogs and regulatory authorities. And there's been that discrepancy about how the Treasury can override. And it's been back and forth. He had to forestall the fight yesterday. In the event he gets his way, isn't that going to be sort of like some full-on financial, authoritarianism in the UK? Because I see that fight brewing and it's coming. Secondly, I'd also like to talk about what is happening with the great proceeds oil companies are making now. You talked about Saudi Aramco in 3 months, about 42 billion. And the need to be able to push for higher numbers in, windfall taxes for those oil companies. Has Rishi finally made up his mind as regards this to push for this till the very end?
As far as windfall tax is concerned, I just repeat what I said, actually, that it gets very complicated. It depends where oil companies actually make their money to start with. Yes, they are all getting the benefits. They're getting windfalls, huge windfalls of the rising energy prices. But does exploration get easier? No, it doesn't. Does the oil price come down? Yes, it does. Will they be asking for help, or will we be willing to give them help when the oil price is falling? No, we won't. And where do they make most of their profits? So these are all very complicated things. I suspect that politically the government will move towards another windfall tax. I'm only suspecting that. I don't know, because when we won't find that out until November the 17th, if we do indeed find something out then. But sure, I mean, public opinion is pushing towards that. It's wrong, because it sees these big profits being made, and it's paying, and it doesn't sell well on the doorstep to say, well, actually, BP makes most of its money overseas. I mean, you can say that, but people don't believe it. All they see is what happens when they want to fill up their car, and so on. And they see Shell, BP, ExxonMobil, doesn't really matter. Saudi Aramco too. I don't know how they're going to deal with their increased windfall, but no doubt there'll be calls on that too, if indeed those kind of calls are allowed within a country like Saudi Arabia. The other thing was, Sunak and the regulators. Yeah, I mean, look, it's only a proposal. It's something which it may be tacked onto the finance bill, which is coming up. Sunak, as you know, has a big city reputation working for Goldman Sachs, so he knows about the way of this. There is a feeling that there is a degree of public interest in this. Again, this is a political move. I'm with you on it. I suspect that it will be watered down by the time it happens. But this is populism writ large. Of course, it is. Yeah.
Okay, the Federal Reserve, Michael, is meeting Tuesday, Wednesday. What should we expect? Is the Fed likely to raise interest rates further by 50 to 75 basis points? What do you expect? I'm trying to keep the questions short. The Bank of England is winding down on quantitative easing. Now, to what extent can they go? And what is the likely impact on bond markets? Finally, something of interest to all of us. Ofcom is pursuing the legislation to end fax machines. That fax machine that all of us started using since about 1984. The younger generation, they don't even know what is called fax machine. I just wanted your comment on this classical transformation from the analog age to the digital age, as the fax machine will disappear, well, let's say in the UK. I don't know many other countries where fax machine is being used. As quickly as I can put those questions, yes.
You may know that on November the 5th, we celebrate or mark Guy Fawkes's attempt to blow up Parliament all those years ago on November the 5th. I would happily throw every fax machine that I've ever used on a bonfire because I was unable, as I'm sure most people, to actually load it in the first place. Did you used to load it with a roll, or did you put individual sheets of paper in? I can't remember. But as far as I was concerned, it was an inky mess that I really could do without, quite honestly. And they were the copies were never clear, so good riddance to fax machines as far as that's concerned. Bank of England, yes, I mean, look, all I'm saying about that is that I've got no idea what they're going to do. I'm seeing that the gilts market have slightly calmed down. Hence, the Bank of England feels it can now go into quantitative tightening, QT, rather than QE, which I think is probably quite good. It's letting the air out of the balloon very, very, very gently indeed, because it's trying to engineer a soft landing. Whether it achieves that, I don't know. We'll be talking about that maybe in a couple of months' time. But at the moment, I think it's good. What it does is it shows that the gilt markets or the bond markets are actually calming down slightly. The yields are still much higher than they were, but in the UK, but still nowhere near as high as they're going to be in Germany, France, and Italy, and the rest of the EU. As far as the Fed's concerned, similar picture for them. Almost without question, a 0.75% rise. It'll be about 75 basis points. The question is, what happens afterwards? I know this is always the thing that we look to. We see the immediate, but we want to look towards the future. And will the Fed has got to be hawkish, it's got to defeat inflation, but will the pace of rises slow in the future? That's what the market is guessing about right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael.